there's this video, it's an Earth Crisis show. There's a dude moshing in the pit. He's a vegan straight edge guy moshing to Earth Crisis while throwing yogurt around in a fur coat. That kind of says everything that you need to know about.
You are now listening to Male Worship Radio.
The Kurt Cobain thing is, I know how we'll segue into cult from, Crud Is A Cult from that is, sort of similar how Deadguy made that, Nirvana shirt.
That they've started selling again.
They have? Really? I want to get one.
Yeah, I was on like it's open on my phone right now, and it's got
get one. It's
so
got all
funny. Old Deadguy shirts, like the Hot Wheels logo shirt, and it's got that shirt. I was like surprised by that.
Yeah, I feel like that might get like a cease and desist again. Because the thing is, I think they put that out like right after he died, and the fact that the band was called Deadguy, and I think isn't the face like kind of like a cartoon of Kurt Cobain?
Yeah, is it like a smiley face with
blonde hair? I think.
Yeah, is it like the is that from The Watchmen, the smiley face with the bullet hole in the head?
Oh.
And
yeah,
is that the shirt? I feel like the shirt is.
Send me the link.
Smiley face,
I gotta buy that shirt.
Bullet hole, Kurt Cobain hair, Deadguy in the Nirvana font.
And then on the back, it's similar to it's the same as the thing I ripped off of, but I forget what Deadguy had like as the verbiage on that. But okay, this is weird. I'm baked, but this is a weird memory of that shirt. The first time I ever saw somebody wearing that was somebody, I think, from Deadguy. Like he was like wearing his own shirt, and it was waiting in line in the bathroom to take a piss. And him and one of the guys from like Mouthpiece, was that like a show that Earth Crisis was playing with Deadguy or something in Framingham? This is a gross like men's room fucking thing, but I was like looking at the back of his shirt, kind of like, oh, that's fucking funny. As I'm waiting to take a piss, and then he like ripped a fart and like giggled and like I don't know what. I have such an association with that shirt, and it was literally like a month after Kurt Cobain died, and it was just stupid memory. Funny though. So yeah, the first time I ever saw that was
the fact that they've started selling that shirt again is wild. I was shocked.
Yeah, I'm stunned actually, because I think about it sometimes. I'm like, it would be a good one to bootleg or something, or just make one for me, make a screen of it. But that's like Disney. You kind of can't. I don't know. I have a feeling if Courtney Love catches wind of that, she'll. Although I don't think she's in charge of the estate anymore. I think Frances is now because she's over 30. So anyway, yeah. Crud.
Excellent. And this segues into Crud because
Deadguy.
Dave Rosenberg from Deadguy was in a band called Flagman. They were like a melodic hardcore band, and Flagman had an alter ego that was a brutally hardcore band called Crud Is A Cult with Sean McCabe on vocals. Sean McCabe would sing in the short-lived Mandela Strikeforce with Don DeVore from Frail, and then later him and Don would start Ink and Dagger, which is interesting because I think that Ink and Dagger and Deadguy are both these very important mid to late 90s hardcore developments, both in sound and presentation. So like they're nothing like each other, but they're both provocations and confrontational in their own way, very different ways, but both kind of equally confrontational. And probably the first kind of wild stuff that happened on the East Coast in a long time.
Yeah, definitely in full agreement of that. It's important to talk about Crud because of the connections, and also like in a sense, like I don't know if it was like a natural thing, but definitely they are a precursor to Ink and Dagger, obviously, but also Deadguy. And I think of the 7-inch that we're about to discuss as being pretty overlooked. And when you listen to it now, it like really holds up. But we should sort of introduce Crud Is A Cult. So Crud Is A Cult is Sean McCabe, as you said, and as we just said, Dave Rosenberg, Josh Brown.
Yeah, Josh Brown would be an Ink and Dagger. He was the bass player, right? Mm-hmm. Ed, what's Ed's last name? The other guitarist?
I can't remember right now. I don't have the thing.
I forgot my trusty iPad.
I should have had mine here, but in any case, yeah, they'll see this and get like, what the? No, there's two Rosenbergs. A Brown,
and Al Rosenberg on drums.
Yeah, Al Rosenberg. That's what I was gonna say. But then when he said Ed, I'm like, is it Ed? Anyway, cut that. So that was Ink and Dagger, and Ink and Dagger were, as you said, also
Well, that was
sort of
Flagman and Crud.
sorry,
lineup
Crud
we
and
just said.
Flagman were yeah, that was Crud Is A Cult. And I guess the crossover there also being that Sean McCabe was the original singer of Flagman. So would it be fair to say like Crud is sort of the original Flagman lineup doing a very different kind of music?
Yeah, I think so. Crud is interesting because they said that they wanted to make sure that it was totally different than Flagman, which is funny
And
because they would like both bands would practice the same day. They would do like a Crud practice, then they would do a Flagman practice, like switch into melodic hardcore mode from this ugly fast thing. Yeah, they were like the anti-Flagman.
That's a good first question. Like, what is what is Crud As A Cult? Because my impression at the time was that they were kind of like a side project. And even if we're talking about this record, it's like the tone of it is so sort of tongue in cheek, and there's a lot of humor involved, but it's also so brutal and awesome. Like it musically sort of holds its own. And they were a band that played shows or whatever. But I think would you say that they were a side project, or would you consider them like a full-fledged band?
I thought that that's how they were thought of and approached things. Like, you know, they often played with Flagman, though they did play their own shows too, but they were known. But I think they were known because they were on a level conceptual.
Which was what, though? It's sort of a joke straight edge band, that 7-inch.
Yeah, except that it's so serious. I think the concept is to be like as ugly and as like hard as possible, but not to give into any of the cliches. If that's the thing, like, and I don't know if this is the time to jump into it, but like that 7-inch has got a song about wasting time, doing all kinds of shit, but being bored out of your mind.
Yeah.
It's got a song about straight edge, which is so good and angry and pissed.
But aren't they kind of like joking? They were kind of making fun of straight edge, I think, with that song.
I don't think they are, because I feel like it's so clear of like what's being said. Keep that shit. Like, what does it say? Like, keep your fucking drugs away from me or something like that. Like, that's the line.
It's like a Project X kind of model of a song, like in tone. Yeah.
And I could be wrong about that reading. To me, it didn't come off like everything comes off as funny, but not necessarily ironic. And I think it's because it's free of cliches. Because then there's this other song about sex, or potentially about, I'm trying to think, my kids just came home, but there's this other song that's the potential about sex, or just depends on how you want to look at it.
5-Finger Headache, is that what you're talking about?
Nobody in the like straight edge scene would write that song. Nobody in the straight edge scene would write a song about how they're just fucking around and wasting time all day. You know, like their sister band Flagman writes about the emotional landscape of like a 17-year-old straight edge hardcore kid in Pennsylvania. And when they write about straight edge, it's like about clarity and being free from whatever bad influences or something like that. But like Crud is angry, and so every single thing, it's unusual because of the stuff they're talking about and the way that they're talking about it. That it's both funny and it's pissed off. It's almost like Born Against.
I think the reason why my impression of it when I bought it 30 years ago, of it being a sort of a send up of straight edge, was because, as we discussed, unfortunately Discogs doesn't have photos of the booklet that came with it. And also I realize the artwork is different, I think, than my copy of it.
There's multiple versions of the cover, definitely.
Okay, so because my copy of it,
totally different versions,
came with it had like a booklet with lyrics, but then it had also like a lot of photos of these guys like drunk and fucked up. Shit, I'm at 10% now. I might have to switch to speaker in a moment to plug my phone in.
All right.
We might just have to deal with it. I'll try to sit closer, but But there's like, a photo I think of like one of those dudes like puking in a toilet, like passed out, and it's just like send your wildest like party stories to Crud or something, or the Cult, like they were just like, and then there's like a band photo of them like hanging out with. I described him. It's like a homeless dude, but he looks like he's dead or something. Like and they're all like hanging out with him. Like it's the presentation of it is so. I found it to be really compelling, but slightly confusing. But then also knowing Sean McCabe was involved, that it very likely wasn't a completely straight-faced thing, and it's interesting.
Yeah,
but I know
it's
that
funny to listen to the record without that context. You know what I mean?
Right.
Without the booklets and whatnot, or even the lyrics being written down, because you're just listening to what you're hearing. But there's this aspect of it that is perhaps the songs just capture where the band was at. And that when they were straight edge, there was a straight edge song. And then when the record comes out, they're not straight edge anymore. So who cares? And it seems very likely that they weren't, because Dave goes on to form Deadguy with Crispy from Resurrection right around the same time that Crud is wrapping up. And I don't know about those two guys and whether they were straight edge or not, but Tim Singer was 100% not straight edge. Keith Huckins from Deadguy basically said that he spent every day that he was in Rorschach blackout drunk, if I recall correctly. So it was like Deadguy were definitely not straight edge. And so it's like entirely possible that by the time they were like putting out the record that was probably posthumous at that point, that they weren't, and it was actually maybe made it even funnier to take this this band and be like, let's like whatever legacy we have as a straight edge band, let's destroy that.
I think that was probably the tone. Now, it's interesting too, because it's like then they throw down like one of the most, I think, sorely overlooked. Like you listen to it now, and it's like this is better than like 90% of it that was coming out back then, just in terms of the writing and like,
oh, so awesome.
In terms of writing, like really great. Just some of it sounds like great classic hardcore with like breakdowns and stuff. I don't want to sound like an old hardcore guy, but it's got all the elements and they do it really well.
But it's like very dark and dirty and not metal at all.
Yeah, and what's interesting is I feel like, do they share the same guitar player or something? Because Flagman's got kind of a similar, and we're going to talk about that hopefully too. But there's really a good sense of like the riffs are good, like they're distinct too. Like I can kind of tell a Crud riff, because I remember a few years ago there was
same dudes as Flagman.
Yeah, and Flagman has that same characteristic, because I remember I heard some unreleased Crud stuff, because I think something's supposed to eventually come out on Toy Box or something. But like even I've just over the years heard things I'd never heard before, and they were either demos or unreleased stuff. I'm like, yeah, they had their own sound, like the guitar, especially the breakdown kind of shit.
And we're like just kind of like winging it in this one and not being as like nerdy and structured as we often are, but there's this other aspect to it, which is that I hadn't heard that in a really, really long time. There's no way I've listened to that since 1995 or something like that. Yeah. And, it's like Sean McCabe's antics so overshadowed things that he did that it was like hard to remember, like, oh yeah, Sean was an awesome vocalist. And really Sean wrote great lyrics and had these big ideas, and that he couldn't help but do things with a subversive edge to them. Sean's musicality was often overshadowed by his antics or persona. Yeah, so if you think about like Crud, like being viewed as a kind of joke band, and then you remember like, oh, that's the band where the singer threw yogurt at Earth Crisis, and that's not his only one of those things, because I feel like he pulled a similar thing with a Krishna band. Maybe I feel like there's like 3 of these stories of him screwing with people that he didn't necessarily disagree with. He just thought they needed to be taken down a notch. They thought they were being too pompous and serious. they just needed to be knocked down. So to anyone who doesn't know, there's this video, I think it's in Middlesex, New Jersey. It's an Earth Crisis show. There's a dude moshing in the pit with a fur coat on, throwing yogurt everywhere. The dude is vegan that you're seeing. He's a vegan straight edge guy moshing to Earth Crisis while throwing yogurt around in a fur coat. That kind of says everything that you need to know about Sean McCabe. Like,
was he vegan?
Yeah, he was vegan. So he took these like things, like the whole thing is I just think he didn't take himself seriously, and he poked holes in people who took themselves seriously. That he was like,
but he was funny, so it worked. So it would never. I mean, it pissed people off, but like I think it's pretty creative. Like we were talking about the zines he did and stuff, and I don't know if Sandbox had it, but there was another zine he did called Dead by 23 that was just, I think it was like a prank thing. I don't know if, but it was just him, and it was just, he would talk about all the pranks they were pulling and stuff, and it was really funny.
Yeah, he was so funny. I mean, I'm trying to remember. So like we talked about this a little bit, but in 1990, what year would this have been? 95, maybe early 96. I can't remember now. I put out this record, the Mandela Strikeforce, which was Mike Parcell from Frail on drums, Don DeVore of Frail, and later Ink and Dagger, and lots of other stuff on guitar. The bass player's name escapes me. He was in a band called the Jazz June at some point, and then Sean McCabe on vocals. And it was this kind of posy, hardcore, not at all like Crud, other than that he sang about stuff that you don't expect people to sing about in hardcore. It was like the happy version of Crud. It was still very much a hardcore band, but like there's this song is like, I'm having a special. It was a song about, like, there was a song, I think it was called I'm having a special party and you're not invited. But the implication was because you're being like an annoying head and you're not being cool. It's like, I probably have one over here. I could read the lyrics, but it was like everything was like about being cool and friendly. But one of the things I remember about Sean was like, the one time I saw Mandela Strikeforce play was like at the More Than Music Fest in Columbus. And Sean, being like this actual sort of maniac, party animal, sex positive dude, there was like a bowl of condoms from like Planned Parenthood. He thought it made much more sense to take all of those condoms and throw them around like confetti and make sure everybody got one, as opposed to politely leaving them on a table to be grabbed by awkward hardcore kids. And
especially in the 90s hardcore scene when people were pretty
like almost like sort of having the condoms there would be like a form of virtue signaling, because it would be like, well, you guys aren't really going to have sex. Whereas like for Sean, it was like, why are these condoms just sitting here? Let's get this going.
That's funny. That's super funny. The thing is with Ink and Dagger, I think then people started to notice, like, they're just like, holy shit, this is a really great band. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think that by the time Ink and Dagger became a thing, people would have maybe regarded him as being, but the thing is, Ink and Dagger had a lot of that baked into the whole concept of the band, like
like Crud wasn't really conceptual. They had an approach. Mandela wasn't really conceptual, it had an approach, or it had a vibe, whereas Ink and Dagger had a plan. It had an entire thing. It had like an ethos and an ecosystem and a visual aesthetic, a lyrical aesthetic, like all of it tied in right from the start. And again, in a way that in hardcore was like exception, not the rule. Like, if anything, Earth Crisis had the same thing, but no one knew it. Everyone just thought they were serious and wanted to go down the street killing drug dealers, not realizing that they were doing like a comic book superhero. Like that, what they were doing was watching Death Wish 4 and making music like that. They weren't really like saying, go get guns and shoot black people, basically, which is what they were accused of by like the hardcore scene.
Right. Yeah, which was like the furthest thing. It's just like Firestorm. When I listen to it now, it is still kind of like, it's like, wow, it's so provocative. But then like the way it's sort of described is like is so comic bookish and like over the top and ridiculous that you can't take it that seriously. But that's kind of weird that everybody did take it so seriously. Both
No,
the
they
people
took it
that were
totally
into it.
seriously because hardcore didn't do that. Like hardcore was like first person, or it convinced you that it was like it's about friends, or it's about my opinion on this thing, or it was about obscure gibberish that you couldn't read into. Earth Crisis were one of the like few bands to be like, we're taking our stuff, our things that we believe in, and we're just extrapolating them to make them huge and exciting. They were essentially doing what metal does or what rap music does.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah,
like
definitely.
Public Enemy were not actually rapping about breaking out of prison. They were like living out a revenge fantasy on society. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
I mean,
yeah,
and Public Enemy is a good one to bring up because everything about them was theatrical and sort of over the top too. And I think that stuff, I think Public Enemy had a pretty big influence on a lot of stuff like tone. Or actually, I think you could probably text Carl and be like, hey, do you like Public Enemy? And you'd be like, hell yeah. You know what I
right.
mean? Like,
As I told you, there is a
oh, right.
an
Yeah,
Earth
yeah.
Crisis
So
song with Chuck D, sort of.
you did tell me. Fuck, I'm stupid. Yeah, so there you go. I mean, but it's like I remember, do you remember like your first impressions of Public Enemy? Like when you saw them on MTV or whatever, it was like, holy, the whole militarized, like.
Oh, yeah. I mean, people freaked out about that stuff. Like they were so intimidated by it, not realizing that, you know, it's like, well, one, not realizing it was informed by 70s rock and like provocation. Like they wanted to be like a big stadium band, but a rap group. Mm-hmm. And they knew that two dudes with microphones wasn't going to do that. That it had
so
to
they
be,
have characters.
Yeah, it had to have an all-encompassing visual aesthetic. And it's funny because it's like, you know, hardcore wasn't used to that, so it couldn't really make sense of Earth Crisis. Like it couldn't relate to it as like fantasy. So it either condemned it or went insane and actually thought, oh, this is how we should like view things. You know, like the ridiculous phenomena of straight edge gangs that was like a thing at one point.
Yeah, totally. The thing is when you think of hardcore, it always, like from its origins, like if you just think of Minor Threat, like Ian MacKaye or something, it is always this first person perspective of. So yeah, that I never thought about that too much before, where like that shift with certain things, and it shifted in other directions too, with stuff we've talked about, like things where things became more oblique, like with Lincoln or something, or
or like certain gravity bands, like trying to, or San Diego type bands trying to like have a presentation of what they were doing, like Antioch Arrow,
right? Yeah,
or the VSS. Ulysses. Like the VSS having a light show, but playing VFWs, like trying to have a light show and like an aesthetic, but playing to 14 people in a VFW in Missouri or whatever.
Yeah, it got perceived as pretentious. But it's interesting though, because it is essentially the same spirit, and it is interesting because you can have a conversation, I think, about Earth Crisis and Nation of Ulysses being kind of paradigm shifting bands that really pissed a lot of people off, because Nation of Ulysses were like heavily criticized for, you remember like an MRR and stuff. It was just like, and then by extension of that, it was like, I just remember like Antioch Arrow would always get thrown under the bus and getting accused of like not even playing their instruments. Like what is this? You know, it's just like noise, you know?
Yeah. And also,
that was part of the concept, you know?
Yeah, and like, you know, like whatever Antioch Arrow we're singing about, like, you know, suspicious or whatever, just doing Dr. Seuss tongue twisters as lyrics.
Yeah.
But of course, like being like understanding too that the real thing you care about with like music is the way that it makes you feel. And if you start to remove meaning from the lyrics on some level, or you make it so obtuse, you're only left to deal with how does this make me feel.
Yeah, what do you still? I can still appreciate the aesthetics of like Antioch Arrow, whom I like really loved at the time. What are your general? I mean, because the whole thing is with that stuff, it seemed like it was all about mood. It was like it was really like hard to understand, but it was just about a feeling that was kind of vague and frustrated, you know. But it wasn't like, and that sort of like, what's the opposite of literalism? I don't know, like that opposition to literalism or something, where it
Yeah, I
just
don't
became
know.
this.
Yeah,
That
because
was
this
really
abstract isn't
welcome to
really
me.
the like term. Yeah, totally. Because at first it's like hard to make sense of, like especially from like a hardcore background, because everything is always a message and a theme, or it's this is my feelings right now, and for a band just to be like,
They're like
it's
goth
like I wish I
poetry.
could remember more of those like Antioch Arrow lyrics, but I remember on that second record that we would like read the
Nonsense.
lyrics to each other out loud and laugh like they were
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah, that's pretty interesting to think about. Yeah, but what I love about an Antioch Arrow record, but I think that the Antioch Arrow records hold up as like they're weird art objects in a weird way. Like they have this, when you listen to it, the music straddles the lines. So it's like U.S. Maple level, like
Mhm.
what the fuckness. But then the record itself, like the gravity presentation of it, just made it like it could have been someone's like part of their master's thesis. Like I made this
Yeah, like
work of art is the record, you know,
what's the
and the
first
music on it.
what's the first 12-inch called? The
In
second
Love
one's
with
the lit.
Jets, such a great title. In Love
Yeah,
with
and that's
Jets,
the
I
one with
think
the
that might
spray
be the
paint stencil, right? It's a spray paint
yeah,
stencil on chipboard. I mean,
yeah.
when
That's
I
I still
bought
have
that
that.
record, it was so unlike anything else I owned. Like musically, it was so different. And then you pull out that giant lyric sheet that's all gibberish, except for there's an arrow with lyrics. It's so if you haven't seen it, it's a typewritten pattern, and then an arrow-shaped chunk of the typewriting is the lyrics to the record. So you look at it at
Yeah,
first, and it just looks like gibberish, and it's like that was so unlike any record I owned in 1993.
yeah. They made a huge impression. I really wanted to check them and Nation of Ulysses out because of all the bad press I was reading and MRR and stuff. Like I wanted to see what was pissing people. That's what attracted to me to it in the first place. Is that the Streisand effect?
Yeah, that's totally the Streisand effect.
Yeah, I wanted to, and I immediately loved it. And then also most of my friends hated it, so I was just like, I loved it even more. It was
Yeah, I
just like,
got accused. I think Scott Byman told me like, "Oh, you should check out Antioch Arrow and Universal Word of Armageddon." So when I was in Fast Forward in Providence, I saw that Antioch Arrow 12-inch, and I was like, and his records were so cheap then, like a hardcore record like that, it was probably $6. So I was like,
yeah, I
all
was just
right,
gonna say six.
yeah, I bought that record, and one of my friends, it was definitely like, you're just saying you like this because you don't want to admit you wasted $6, and it was definitely jarring and like so different, but
Mm,
it was like, sometimes when something is jarring and so different, that's what makes you be like, what is going on? And then of course
yeah,
by the time the second record came out, everyone I knew loved it. You know what I mean? The whatever, the
I
In
don't
Love
know.
with Jets or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know if you're familiar with the record label ESP Disc. They were
Yeah,
out of
yeah.
New York. Um, in a weird way, like the Fugs and the Gods and like just a lot of jazz too. But like Antioch Arrow could have been. They're almost like an ESP Disc band, like out of time. We should talk about one of those because they're basically like EPs.
Yeah,
Sorry, I
it's
gotta move this.
borderline no wave too, which like I didn't really think
Yeah,
about.
yeah, they really relate to no wave music. Oh my god, my shit is a disaster today. But yeah, they
It's so deconstructed.
yeah, and I think really it holds up as stuff, you know, like but the thing is I was so heavy into it that those records bring back tons of memories. Like if they're but the what's interesting about them is that this is turning into an Antioch Arrow. But they it's like unwound records are also records that bring a lot of memories. But the thing is about the Antioch Arrow records is because I could never make any like sort of like linear sense of any of it. That it has all these live sounds and unexpected like just vocal things and guitar things that were probably just on the spot. That I guess that's why it makes me think of an ESP disc record. It has that similar, like, this feels like a document of some weird performance thing or something, where it's just like a live jazz thing or something. But
yeah, and I recall like with that stuff, how much, I guess not, well, I don't know if it's a heart attack thing, but I certainly remember Kent McClard reviewing stuff like that so negatively, with like so much hate. Like almost like
he wanted to politicize everything. I
yeah,
think.
yeah, it was almost like
he was offended by the lack of politics.
Yeah, and or like the UOA 12-inch on Gravity, that's like kind of a almost a dub versions of their stuff, but like not quite. And like harshly reviewing that too, instead of being like, oh man, it's cool that this band is like exploring other stuff, or not everything has to be about whatever, the prison industrial complex.
Yeah. Labor rights for whatever. Yeah. But the thing is, it's interesting is UOA to me does seem like a critique of capitalism, and they do seem in line with, they're just not being as literal about it. And then a band like Antioch Arrow, I guess it's like they're
like Gertrude Stein.
Yeah, they're like, it's like painting or something. But Nation of Ulysses were very political. They were essentially like Marxists. They were very clear about like their whole. So I don't know. I think that Kent McClard was just one of these scene people with strong opinions or something. That,
he had like a very what would you call it, like Protestant view.
Yeah, and he also had his
like
own
extreme
brand push
purity
too. Yeah,
but
I think they were just like kind of doing the DC thing though. They were just trying to represent what was happening. Because the thing is, I don't know if you saw that San Diego documentary about the music scene there.
I haven't watched it yet.
Did. The people I knew from San Diego, being like the Locust guys, and I said it before, it just seemed like everybody was kind of into supporting, because it's a pretty small city, so it was just a lot of overlap. And I think everybody universally like loves what's that band, Rocket from the Crypt. Yeah, like they're sort of like I don't know, what would be the Boston, like Converge of Boston or something.
Yeah.
San Diego, like props, like Universal. I never got that band personally, but
I've always been more but that's my like Protestant aesthetic, is like more Drive Like Jehu, less Rocket from the Crypt.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. But we kind of missed Crud Is A Cult. I feel like we skimmed it.
I have a thing to say about I do have a thing to say about Crud that all of a sudden popped in my head, and it's that listening to it now, the thing that comes through to me is the relationship between what Crud was doing sonically and Deadguy is much closer than I would have thought. Like there are Crud riffs where I'm like, oh, I could have seen this on the one of the early Deadguy records. Listening to the Crud 7-inch and even the Flagman 7-inch that we'll cover, is some of this I could hear on a Deadguy record, and it made me wonder if Dave Rosenberg contributed riffs to Deadguy outside of the drumming.
I was really ignorant of the shared member or the relationship between the bands until we brought this up recently. So I would say that it would, without a doubt, the flavor would transfer. That's a stupid way, but like if it shares members, there's a common thread, I think, in sound that I never put together, and I can hear it too.
And I have no idea if Dave Rosenberg wrote any riffs for that band, but there's lots of bands where like whoever plays contributes.
But you were also talking about like musically and the music kind of picking up on sort of like a power violence influence. I think especially like on the first track, it just blows.
Yeah. Because I think like
crossed out.
If I had to think about Crud and it being all these people from Flagman and then being kind of a jokey hardcore band, I would expect it just to sound like more Youth Crew stuff. You know what I mean? Like if I go into my memory hole and try to figure out, what did Crud sound like? Like, it's like Mouthpiece type shit, but with Sean McCabe singing. And then it's like, no, it's like, it's very dark, angry music with these like power violence blast beats that I wasn't expecting.
Yeah. Yeah,
And then it's awesome because it's got like these gang vocals. I mean,
I do think that there is like this weird, like, both in Flagman and in Crud with some of both bands have an aspect that remind me of, or a parallel to certain aspects of Mouthpiece. Like there's a sound between those three that like, and I know they played together and stuff, but it's like a more, to me, a more palatable, more awesome kind of, because it's got more metal in it or something. But in some weird way, there are moments on the Crud 7-inch that are not dissimilar to like something on a Mouthpiece, like that Dedication song. Like,
yeah, well, I think there's an aspect to them, which is that they are like straight hardcore. Like they're not metal. If you were to be like, it's 1994, make a heavy hardcore record, what you would mean is throw in metal riffs. Don't do that. They just like amp up the noise and play like kind of not always fast, but it's something about it that is much more brutal than what I would be expecting. But the thing with Mouthpiece is like there was no metal in Mouthpiece at all.
No, it was all hardcore.
Which I think is one of the reasons that like even though
with
I found
breakdowns, but
yeah, I found that LP like boring in when it came out, but now I kind of like that LP. I sort of think it's bad, but I sort of think it's great at the same time. Like I joke that if I was going to start a hardcore band, it would sound like the Mouthpiece LP, even though I don't even think the Mouthpiece LP is spectacular. But there's something about like the fact that it doesn't sound like a typical mid-90s hardcore record with a super metal influence. It's very, I guess basically I'm saying it would sound like Chain of Strength.
Yeah, well, Mouthpiece, in some ways, they kind of are like, I think they're a really, the thing is, I didn't like, we were talking about the other day, the whole Varsity Jacket, the Jock, like, I didn't like the vibe, but I always did kind of like Mouthpiece, and I'm sure you saw them a bunch too. Like, they're a really good band. Like, they're awesome.
Yeah, I saw them, I think I didn't see them a lot. I saw them 2 or 3 times. But
they're a good example of I think they carried this. They were obviously very aware of it, but trying to carry the spirit of hardcore. But I think it came through so well with them because Tim is so like he was like fanatical about in a sense of about what hardcore is versus like what it was becoming at the time. And
yeah, because they had like weird little
a lot
beefs.
of conviction.
Like beef with Frail and stuff.
What was the beef with Frail? You talked some shit.
The basic gist of it is I think they were playing a show with Frail. If you think about like early Frail just is Mouthpiece with the guy from Honeywell on vocals. If you want to like simplify it, singing about
musically.
phobia. Like that's basically what it is.
Having an autistic meltdown about being picked on or something.
Yeah, and Mouthpiece were important. So the general gist of it was I think that Mouthpiece were playing with Frail, and Frail did the like thing that bands did at the time. They'd get on, half their set would be spent talking about issues that were important to them. And Mouthpiece got on and said something to the extent of, this is hardcore. We're not going to give you a bunch of fucking speeches. This song is about hardcore, something like that. I am massively paraphrasing because, again, it's been 100,000 goddamn years since I would be aware of this. But, like Eric from Frail was super bummed out by that because he was a Mouthpiece fan. That was like important music to them. Like like starting a straight edge hardcore band in New Jersey, you're listening to Mouthpiece, or Flagman, whatever. Yeah. But yeah, so like Mouthpiece was like pretty over what was happening. I imagine like them playing with Chokehold, even Chokehold probably irritated the shit out of them with the speeches.
Yeah, it is interesting. I think that the hardcore thing in New Jersey was Frail from New Jersey. No, they're from Philly, but that's pretty close. Were they divisive? I feel like they were a trendy band for a minute.
I think older people found them cringy.
Yeah.
I remember
I find them cringy now.
Randy and Vic from like Studio 158, which is a space where I used to see shows in the 90s, and Randy Larson, like he would make fun of us for wearing Frail shirts or being like, oh, They'd be like, you need to be excited. One of those twitchy bands is playing, meaning like a bunch of skinny kids like flailing around because they, of course, had sense and were listening to Today's the Day, which I should have been doing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Finn McKenty showed a Pharrell clip recently and was laughing at it. You know, I don't know if you saw that, like making fun of the. I mean, it is cringe. I feel bad for Eric, honestly. He's probably like, it's like that Homer Simpson thing. You just disappear into the bushes.
I mean, I haven't talked to him
he's so young.
Since like whatever New Bedford Fest 1996 or something. But I got to imagine that's got to be one of those things where like if people at work are sharing the video, you're like, oh god damn it.
It's like that piece that Sam McFeeters wrote for Vice years ago about YouTube when he was like just the horror of like the fact that
don't want you on the radio debating hardcore guys from 1987 to resurface. You want it to stay in 1987.
Or just his antics, like because I think he's kind of come to grips with the fact that he has mental health issues and was just sort of acting out when he was younger, like at shows and stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I think he may have described his years of men's recovery project as being really rough. Like his mental health was fucked. You know, it was just he's like, people thought that was creative. I was losing my fucking mind, you know, and I was really miserable. And then just touring too, I think was really triggering. I don't know what his diagnosis is, but like, I think he's got this, but yeah, Frail, man. But I don't know. I have reluctant respect for whatever that Frail shift, like, was kind of cool. I like them. I have a Frail.
Well, it was like necessary. I mean, the other thing that is, I really like it now still, where they ended up at the end. They're sort of stripped down quasi Swizz thing that they were doing on like their last few songs. That stuff aged really well, I think.
I gotta check it out again. Yeah, because the other thing too, in terms of the cringy vocals or whatever, though, like there's not that much difference between that, or there's not a huge amount of distance between that and Native Nod. It just seems like a more like high gain, like it's more worked up, you know, and the music's a little different. But I think Native Nod records, I loved them then. I can't listen to them now. They're really beautiful looking, like the way they made the whatever that Art Nouveau-ish looking one or whatever and stuff.
The blue one, yeah. No, I mean, that kind of vocal I have a real hard time with now.
Me too.
You know what I mean? Like it has to be recorded so well to work, because otherwise, because it's just annoying. And the other thing is that it makes everyone sound the same. That was like the worst thing about that. And
because anyone can do it.
Because everyone just ends up, you know, it's like kind of the problem with like the like black metal vocals that all sound the same. And it's just like, I always felt like the most disappointing thing about Deadguy or like Tim Singer's legacy was that like Tim Singer's voice sounded like Tim Singer, and you'd think more people would have embraced that. Like, oh, I don't have to do a thing. I don't have to do like a certain type of scream or a certain type, you know, like how all the pop punk bands all had that same style of vocal by like 2001. And you're
dude, I heard Hot Rod Circuit on WFMU the other night, and I wanted to like leap out the window. I was like, how the fuck do people listen to this shit? The formula, like that was by like it was like Promise Ring and Texas Is the Reason kind of, and that like that era kind of got the ball rolling. And by 2001, everybody's singing and playing in the same way. And
I think it's interesting because I think when music becomes very formulaic to like a genre, that's like a sign, like, and especially if the band is popular, it's a sign that it's just a lifestyle accoutrement. It has to sound that way to get bought by a specific audience to be part of their lifestyle. And that's how you end up with these vocal styles where it's like, it's black metal, it has to be like this. It's death metal, it has to be like this. It's pop punk, it's got to be like this. Whereas the special stuff is always just the first person to do that.
Yeah. I'm not trying to segue in, but I would say like Sean McCabe is a good example of somebody who had a really distinct. He just sang the way he sang, and he's like
he
one of the
sounds
best
like Sean
vocalists.
McCabe on every record.
Yeah.
Or that even the dude, I mean, there's like so many examples, but unfortunately there's not enough examples. But like the dude from Botch, like you could hear he was obviously influenced by stuff, but you could hear his voice. He didn't
just
push it
use
into
your voice.
pure screamo, where it's all interchangeable high pitched bullshit or whatever.
Yeah. It's interesting because I remember I was telling you the other day that I used to always try to pitch Lungfish to my bandmates when I was in that band with John Studer like 25 years ago with Bill, my other bandmate Uriah. But their criticism of Lungfish was always, because I'd play them like Sound in Time or something, they would get highly irritated by Dan's vocals because they would say, well, they would try to be like, because they're art school people, not John, but everybody else. It's too rangy or pitchy or something, because Higgs kind of like has this thing where he is kind of like screaming, but it's not really screaming. He's just singing at the absolute, like, or he was for a large part of his career, like at the absolute limit of his voice.
Yeah,
the edge. In the same way Steven Tyler does, but he's still in pitch. He's still, or the same way Kurt Cobain. Like, there's a lot of Rod Stewart's another one. And I think what we're discussing and like hardcore and screamo is this sort of atonal shriek that developed. Yep. But it's weird because like Honeywell has it, but kind of not. But then again, it's like Honeywell's kind of an example of like,
I feel like Honeywell was the first too.
I was going to say one of, and then also the thing that I love about the vocals is they sit in the mix on that record in a way that it's like a Zaster record where it's like an instrument.
Yep.
Like, I know there are lyrics, but it's like everything is interesting, and the vocals have this timbre about them that is actually sort of like really like in key and in step with like the guitars.
And the other thing. Texture. Like the other thing about Honeywell too is those vocals were processed to feel like an instrument. Like they're clearly being run through a distortion pedal because the vocals are consistent across all their records, right? From the demo to the 7-inch to the LP. I'm positive the vocals are being processed as part of the band's sound, not as an aesthetic decision for an LP.
Interesting.
Which I think makes sense.
Honeywell.
Yeah, we're gonna have to talk about that record at some point.
We have to. That is so important. I would argue that is one of the most important records of that decade, easily, and like one of the kind of like low key forgotten.
Yeah, and I think there's that thing which is like in Honeywell, all the form was on the same level. The guitars are like these buzzsaw screeching guitars drenched in noise. The vocal is this buzzsaw screeching vocal drenched in noise.
That's what,
the recordings are drenched in. I mean, it's actually weird because it's like I've never heard black metal mentioned in the context of Honeywell.
We've talked about this. But when I
first heard like some of that stuff recently-ish, I was like, oh, was Honeywell into this? But actually what I've like read is that Honeywell saw Bastard Noise and freaked out. And they were like, basically like, okay, what if a hardcore band does this? Like just adds noise to everything so that the guitars are just constantly feeding back and like the whole thing is this mangled mess. The vocals work so well in there because they're designed to do the same thing as every other aspect. Whereas like then that shit just got pushed on top of everything of just some dude screeching on the floor, sounding like he's going to give himself throat cancer.
Yeah, but it's so interesting because it's like, again, I mean, maybe I just perceive things, but like, I feel like Honeywell, I mean, I know they were a band, they played shows. It definitely sounds like a band that made a record and everything, but that is a kind of a masterpiece album. That's almost like it feels like a weird concept. Like you listen to it and it almost like, I know it's political in some points lyrically or in a lot of it, but it's very similar to Rorschach Protestant in that I can't like listen to just a track or part of it. It's like I gotta listen to it and then it just pulls you right through like a narrative and it has arcs and it's really what a fucking record. I mean, somebody's got to do something about like getting that back out.
It's like messed up because like the original tapes are gone. they were like recorded over to make the Los Cincos 12-inch. But like, I don't know, the dudes that repressed it from Florida, like, I don't know what they used to repress it. Like, I don't know if they got the plates from Mollycoddle. Can't remember what the name of Honeywell's label was. They put out the records
Mollycoddle.
Yeah, I don't know if they got the plates from them and were like, can we repress it? Because I know they repressed it with permission.
Okay.
But I don't think they have the tapes, because otherwise, just get the tapes.
Maybe it's almost best that thing just, it's almost like it's the ultimate, like it almost seems like it would be dumb for Gravity. I hope they never do actually like come back around and go, we're going to do recreations of our original releases. So like make, you know what I mean? Like just kind of to get it back. Like it's almost best that Honeywell thing is just like.
It is what it is.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, that makes it highly collectible if it ever becomes coveted. But I mean, I don't know how many were pressed. So
I don't think a lot. And my like interactions with that label were very strange.
Because they weren't really like, I mean, I know they're sort of hardcore kids, but they kind of weren't, right? Like they were just sort of weirdos, right?
I mean, I was told that Honeywell were basically a straight edge band in the beginning. I don't know how much truth there is to that. But like I remember they were like, do not put Mollycoddle on the envelope. I don't know if they were worried about like the IRS or something. Okay. Do I have it? No. I made this book called DIY Album Art.
I can't see anything right now.
Oh, it doesn't matter. I can't find it anyway. And the Honeywell LP, one of the repressed versions, or maybe it's a split 7-inch with Reach Out. One of those versions that the Florida guys did was in the book. And I found someone, probably Bobby Sell, I can't remember, but somebody from Honeywell, so that I could get a release to publish an image of the cover. And he wouldn't sign it, but not because he didn't want me to publish it, but I believe he was really cautious because the covers had copyrighted photography in them. And I think that he was like, I can't sign a release on a thing where I stole the photography. And this is a while ago. This is like 2009. So it's like shaky. But I remember the implication wasn't you can't put it in the book. It was I can't sign a release, which is like a very different animal. So they, for whatever reason, they seem very cautious about legality. And maybe that's why that label didn't do a ton of stuff. But that's a conjecture. I just remembered a couple like interactions.
Yeah. I can't. And who are that you know how the record intros and it sounds like little kids? Is that like an old recording of them or something?
I think
or were they really that young?
Yeah. No. I think that's like, I have a feeling that's like them at like 12 or something.
It's
something in Bobby.
It's so like it's so well edited. My impression of how it was made was that when I listen to it, at least, is that they're just all live sessions. There's some overdubs, I think. I remember there's like parts that sound like overdubs, but it sounds like they took a bunch of material and then just, it sounds really like well selected, you know, just like a sound collage kind of thing. Like that record is almost sort of a noise record in a lot of ways. And it also relates to black metal. And there aren't a lot of examples of that in from that scene or from that era that just are, it's an anomaly completely.
No, it's totally an anomaly.
That would be, honestly, that would be the number one record if I ever had the finances or ability to kind of give that kind of attention to, like if we were talking about reissues, like it just, I believe that for that purpose alone, I think it's so unique and interesting and more people should. And not for like weird sentimental reasons, like I would like, Arise were really good and important for like metalcore. It's just like Honeywell's just like so left field.
When you and I were like kind of rediscovering that record, I was also texting my friend Eric that was like in Harvest, and he was listening to it, and he was like, holy shit, this thing's incredible. And I don't remember if he had heard it at the time or not, because like being in Harvest, you already know he's like kind of would have had different aesthetic concerns. Maybe. Sorry, Eric. But then it was like I sent him the demo. And even the demo was like, the demo's awesome too. Yeah, no, there's like an actual demo tape, which I now realize is probably the first thing I heard from them. Scott Byron probably put it on a tape for me. The demo's awesome. Everything that's on the LP in terms of tone, quality, weirdness, it's all there. Like extended bizarro bits of noise and collage and stuff. And I do think that they're a band that seems like they just figured out, like, they finished up their business and then moved on to the next thing. Like then they did
which was
Cinco's, which was like, like surf. That kind of surf rock thing. Or what was the first thing? Cool. One-Eyed Richard and the Goddamn Liars. And then they like Los Cinco's, and then years later they did Volume 11, which was basically Honeywell just minus one person.
Interesting. Yeah, I like the fact that they didn't really give a fuck about sticking to the plot. Like that it's pretty respectable.
Yeah. You go from having your photos in Kent McClard's zine to you're on Sympathy for the record industry.
Oh, is that stuff released on Sympathy?
That's where Los Cinco's ended up.
Oh, okay. And so they, I guess, probably found like kind of like a scene among that in Southern California and all. Yep. That's interesting. So far from hardcore, like at least from my perspective. But
yeah, totally. I mean, it's funny because it's like it's not right, but it was like worlds away.
Honeywell, man, that's my wish list. I mean, I hope. I'm so grateful I have the actual record, and I don't know if I have the split with Reach Out. Yeah, that LP is pretty remarkable.
That's one I wish I had like multiples of. I think I just have one copy.
I think one of the most compelling things about that I found that was like with the presentation of the artwork and just the theme of, this is going to sound, I think we've been real critical. So like, this is going to sound like, I feel self-conscious because it's going to sound creepy, but there's like a tone of like childhood through the intro of them on the track as kids. And then also just like throughout all of it, it's just these photos of like little kids at like a museum or something that it's really still very difficult for me to put my finger on about why and how that was so effective. And it didn't seem emo to me, even though
it also doesn't received. It doesn't come off as like sinister either. It's very odd.
No, it's really perfect. It feels so pure. It's like, what it felt like, this is gonna sound really kind of maybe a reach and stupid and pretentious, but it's like the spirit of the record and how it was made and how they maybe collaborated as friends that grew up together has that playful nature to it, even when they're making like kind of serious pissed off hardcore or something. Maybe that's why it worked, but I don't know where those photos came from or what they are, but it's pretty good. Yeah, effective.
Yeah, let's see if I can project this properly.
I wish I could.
I know you can't see it, but the audience can see it. So this is the Honeywell LP. The cover is two kids watching Ernie on TV.
Oh, it's like Sesame Street.
Yeah. And then the back cover is these like spelling cards. And then the lyric sheet is looks like a page ripped out of a notebook with typewritten stuff. Oh yeah, and then there's more people. Yeah, they're like in some kind of like natural history museum or something.
You know what I think it is I think it's because these are like children that these are like human beings that are about our age, and those photos look like they're of the era of like when we were kids. Maybe it's partially that. So it is kind of like evocative in that sense, but it doesn't have like a nostalgic. I think it's so out of place for like being, it's like a hardcore,
Yeah, it really is a cool, like special record and like ahead of its time.
Yeah, and just I don't think anyone ever recreated the thing that like it'd be interesting how influential that actually was. Like it is in my mind.
Like that people ran with.
What about the vocals?
The shrieking.
That they liked?
But like Elements of Need, now that I think about it, which was Eric Wareheim's band, they distorted the vocals on purpose and did that kind of like just full throat bleed screaming, and that's got to be like a Honeywell influence.
Yeah, and I would also, I pretty distinctly remember Jake liked Honeywell quite a bit too, but I could see where maybe he would pick up at least the idea of using the vocal as more like an instrument in that sense too. It's just that's one I've returned to a lot over the years. I like that record more some days than like a UOA record or something.